Energy Transition, episode 29. The topic today is Energy Plan in Europe. Hello, Irineslav and Dave Blackmon.
Hello.
Hello, good morning and afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon. Please let me share a comment from Doug Carey. Can you see the screen? Sharing screen?
Yes.
Okay. So he said that a topic that he would like to see is the European oil and gas capability versus their will to take advantage of them. And it's a very provocative issue, and I like it.
Yes.
And the point, Irina, please, if you allow me to ask you, do you see political potential to reach a realistic energy plan in Europe?
The short answer is no. Not after all the net zero commitments and pledges and investments and legislation. If suddenly European governments decide to be reasonable and rational about energy security, it will be a 180-degree turn, which I don't think they would risk after, for years, telling people we should go greener and greener and greener, and we shouldn't develop our oil and gas resources, or in the case of the UK, we should reduce production and build more wind farms. So I don't think there's a political will, and the recent speech by French President Emmanuel Macron was really a clear signal that they're not going to do it. He said this is the end of abundance with transition. He did not prioritize energy security. He prioritized the transition. And this tells you everything you need to know about, the dominant mood and the dominant opinion in Europe right now, sadly. But that's where we're at.
So, David, is a dilemma between security and transition?
Yeah, and as we see in the United States, we see the same thing in Europe. The policymakers who are the ruling class right now continue to double down on no abundance, hardship, deprivation, and transition. And they repeat the same talking points in every interview. They continue down the same path that's created the looming disaster, frankly, in Europe, much of Europe, that we're going to see this winter. And the same people now, I understand Ursula von der Leyen is making a speech today. It's probably still ongoing, in which she now promises that the EU, whose policymakers played a big role in creating this energy crisis in the first place, is now planning to intervene in the energy markets to fix it. So how's she going to fix it? Well, I will guarantee you what she's going to do is to double, triple, quadruple down on exactly the same policies that created the energy crisis in the first place, under the pretense that building more windmills and more solar arrays can somehow create some level of energy security on the European continent. And I mean, if we don't understand by now that that's not going to happen, not going to be the case, then, shame on us. I don't know how many times we let the same ruling class fool us before we begin to change the ruling class.
Obtain the Nord Stream 2 licensing could be the solution for all the process. I mean, Russia start compressing gas again to Europe?
I don't know if they have enough turbines.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But they're not going to restart the Nord Stream start, not restart. They're not going to start Nord Stream 2 because it's the same as, allowing fracking in Germany or Poland. It would amount to admitting they were wrong. And they are so wrong, and they have been, by they I mean politicians and EU officials, they have been so wrong for so long that admitting that you've been so wrong for so long right now would amount to political suicide.
Yeah, that's right.
I think that's right. And so I just don't, unfortunately, I think it's very unfortunate. And I again, I feel guilty whenever I laugh about this because it is so absurd.
You shouldn't.
The whole situation is so absurd, and it is laughable. And, but I'm so concerned about the potential for some real humanitarian crisis, not just in Europe, but this crisis is having ramifications in China and other parts of Asia and Africa now, and it's creating a fertilizer shortage, which is going to create a food shortage, which is going to create starvation in developing nations. And it's all goes back to these energy policy choices that these exact officials, Macron, has been around for quite a while now. He's one who has made these decisions. You can give Olaf Scholz in Germany some pardon on this because the real decisions were made by Angela Merkel and preceding
but he
governments.
continues them.
But he continues them. That's right.
Them.
Yes. And so it's this fealty to the narrative that ensures that Irina is right, that they won't change course because that conflicts with the narrative. And the narrative is the thing, and it's going to continue to be the thing until they're either forced from office or they resort to some very harsh measures to remain in office. And that's another potential tragedy that we could be looking at down the road.
David, the other side, for natural gas, for instance, in the United States, one of the major exporters nowadays, is a robust system, a winning system?
Well, yeah, it is very robust, and it the potential for U.S. exports of LNG is pretty phenomenal, really, when you look at the extent of the resource here. But of course, we, just as in Europe, we have a government now that is working very diligently to prevent expansion of the resource, of the tapping of the resource in the United States by refusing to permit the expansion of infrastructure. And that includes LNG export facilities, loading terminals, and pipelines, the midstream part of the industry. And to the extent they can, they try to limit the upstream, but their power to do that is mainly on federal lands and in the Gulf of Mexico. And so they continue to refuse to hold lease sales, even though they give it lip service from time to time. But yes, it's a very robust system, and it has tremendous potential to be helpful around the world.
Irina, do you see from Europe that this LNG from the United States is a stable supply? So is it a reliable supply for a long time?
Well, it's reliable in as much as the US is a friendly country. Bilateral relations are strong and good. But there's the little matter of capacity, which David has mentioned on more than one occasion. There is not enough LNG to feed the whole of Europe. There are not enough LNG tankers to carry it, and there are not enough LNG import terminals to accept it. So it is reliable politically, and right now it's economically feasible, because normally pipeline gas will always trump LNG on cost. But right now, with pipeline gas where it is in terms of prices in Europe, LNG is, it's really the only option. But I wanted to go back to a point David made, saying he felt guilty about laughing about it. We laugh about Europe because Europe is suffering the consequences of really disastrous decision making. What I don't think any of us would laugh about is what's happening in Pakistan, for example, or in
Right.
Sri Lanka. We're talking about really massive blackouts, not just rolling blackouts for an hour or two a day. And these are the people who are paying the price for Europe's insufficient energy security, because Europe is wealthy enough to afford all the LNG it can buy from the US, for now at least. I mean, money tends to run out unless you generate more of it by producing something.
Right.
And while Europe is running itself into the ground, this really has nothing to do with developing nations in Asia or Africa. And yet they are the ones who are paying the price for Europe running itself into the ground and taking all these nations with it, which is a really tragic thing. It's nothing to laugh about. And that's why we don't laugh about it.
David, do you believe that the gas from Norway and from North Africa is something significant for the Europe supply consumption?
It could be, but again, you have in Norway a government that is scaling back on its own willingness to develop those fossil fuel resources. And we saw Reuters ran a story this weekend with a photograph of what had been a beautiful, pristine plateau, an island out there in the ocean offshore Norway, that is now covered up in giant windmills, where if you had attempted to put a drilling rig on it, a single drilling rig, you would have had an outrage from the environmentalist community. But they look at a dozen or 2 dozen windmills and think that's just beautiful. And it produces a pinprick of the energy that Norway could produce. And so Norway scaling back. North Africa is a different story. They want to produce their resources, but their societies are constantly engaged in civil wars and social upheavals, and that ends up disrupting the ability to produce and export those resources. So, Europe is in quite a conundrum because there are energy resources in Europe that have been very much neglected. They're not enormous resources by any means, but they could play a role in alleviating some of the problem down the road. But you continued fealty to this narrative that you're going to resolve it all with windmills and solar panels is going to prevent that from happening anytime soon. So they'll continue to cast about for other sources of imported energy, and you'll continue to see $1,000 per megawatt hour electricity prices in Germany now, and $500 per megawatt hour in England now, compared to $14 and $16 prices here in the United States. And it's just the governments are going to have to ultimately, there's going to be a limit to how much of that the people in those societies are going to be willing to bear before there is a tremendous amount of social upheaval. And, what happens then is anyone's guess, but it could get very dicey.
And let's not forget that now they're attacking Norway for asking market prices for its gas,
right.
and for thinking about limiting electricity exports so there's enough electricity for its own population.
Yeah.
I don't think that's very wise right now, but they're doing it. Finland and Denmark are complaining about plans by the Norwegian government to curb exports of electricity. And yes, and the Financial Times, David Shepard reported recently that some in the industry, in the oil and gas industry in Europe, are suggesting, privately, that maybe Europe should ask Norway to lower the price at which it sells its gas to Europe. Help out friends, stop making billions in gas revenues.
Right.
Or better yet, why not give it out for free? Because, solidarity and unity and all that. It's getting ridiculous.
But these are the kinds of things that happen as these governments understand they are going into a major crisis in which they're going to have to deal with
It's
a
desperate.
tremendous amount
Yeah, it's really desperate.
of social unrest.
They are
And so that's
pushing
the
the
kind of
crisis.
unreasonable kinds of requests you see start to happen as the crisis comes nearer and nearer, and there's no apparent solution to it in any
There is
real
no
sense.
That's the point. That's the point. So the conclusion is that there is no solution in short term for Europe.
No.
No, and in the longer term, they're either going to have to surrender on this fealty to this narrative in part, or the ruling class will fall in these countries, and then we'll just have to see what it's replaced with, which may not necessarily be any better.
It could always get worse. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not so sad to say it's a nice conversation, but at the same time, it's a sad conclusion.
We can only deal with the truth as it's presented to us.
Yeah, as depressing as it can be.
Thank you so much for this nice conversation this Monday. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. And try to have a nice week.
After this doom and gloom.
Yeah.
What a way to
Starting
start.
Monday with so sad story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Bye.